Good morning, everyone. Delighted to welcome you here to the CECAN conference. I'm Nigel Gilbert. I'm the director of the Centre for the Evaluation of Complexity across the Nexus. And the CECAN was launched in March 2016, so more than 8 years ago now, in response to a need to develop the culture of evaluation across government, helping public servants to more effectively address the gap between policy development, implementation, and evaluation. From its launch in 2016, CECAN's primary aim has been to make policymakers and evaluators work easier and more effective, and to reduce the risk of evaluations being inadequate. And we've been working with government departments, with academics, and with evaluation experts in a variety of complex policy areas related to the food and energy and environment nexus since then. We've developed a suite of complexity appropriate approaches to evaluation during that time. One of those most deeply implicated in getting CECAN off the ground was Siobhan Campbell, who at the time was the head of policy evaluation at the Department of Energy and Climate Change, the deck that was. I'm really glad that she's accepted our invitation to give our first keynote today on evaluation's growing role in government decision making. Siobhan had an illustrious career, spending a total of 23 years in the civil service, in Scottish Government, at Treasury, at DEC, and then becoming Deputy Chief Scientific Advisor at the Department for Transport. Recently, she moved into the private sector to join the engineering consultancy WSP, and a couple of weeks ago, she tells me, was appointed the Chief Strategy and Commercial Officer at the National Manufacturing Institute, Scotland. Siobhan's going to talk for about 30 minutes and leaving a few minutes for Q&A afterwards. So, welcome, Siobhan. Glad to have you here.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Yes, and thank you all for having me here. As I say, I've got a huge history in this space over decades now. I mean, it really is a long time. So today I'm going to talk you through, oh, there's a clicker somewhere. Is the clicker?
On the left turn.
On the left, yes.
Thank you very much. Too obvious to see. So as I say, I moved 2 weeks ago to NMIS. So this has got nothing to do with NMIS, but I'm really excited about my new job. So we've got NMIS kind of slides here. And as I say, I'm the new Chief Strategy and Commercial Officer, but really interestingly, one of the first things that happened when I joined NMIS was I got shown the evaluation that was given of our performance. And it was really interesting to see it. I've always been on the other side of things, kind of writing these reports and making sure that we were doing these right and kind of really pushing and advocating. It was a really interesting experience being the recipient of an evaluation and thinking, oh God, what do we do about all of this now? But that's not what I'm talking about today. As I say, I'm just quite excited about my new role. So what I want to do a bit of today is a bit of the kind of before, during and after, past, present and future around evaluation, especially in government decision making. I want to be very, very clear before I start that I am no longer a civil servant, and so pre-election periods and all these things I'm kind of immune from that, but do then take, I'm not speaking for government and of government, I'm reflecting on my experience there. So just kind of very, very clear there. But I'll start with the past, kind of where we were and why we got there, a bit of kind of where we think we are now, and then going on forward, kind of where evaluation needs to get to still. And I think we've made enormous strides, which I'll hopefully talk about in the next wee while, but there's still a long way to go for evaluation. So these this isn't kind of past, present or future, but it is a bit about kind of all the different stakeholders that are involved. So we have kind of government analysis function. One of the other roles I had in government before I left was the deputy head of the government social research profession. Every title I end up kind of getting anywhere close to have very, very long titles. But is the government social research, or GSR, that has most to do with the actual practice of evaluation within government. And I don't know if there's any kind of GSR people here today, or else you will be dealing, if you're dealing with government evaluation, you're most likely to be dealing with a GSR person. But the government analysis function covers all the analytical disciplines that deal with that. There's the cross-government evaluation group. Again, I chaired that for about 6 years. I'll talk a bit about kind of their role in just moving evaluation forward in government. Departments, this is a departmental problem. And again, I'll talk about that, because I think the ownership of evaluation, where the responsibility, where the agency around evaluation sits, is vitally important in making progress. Treasury Cabinet Office, they are the kind of the two new powerhouse leaders of evaluation in government, and I think a lot of the progress that's been made relate to them. The Evaluation Task Force, a really good new initiative, and of course academics, and I haven't got the kind of research organisations. These are the kind of these are the people that are actually doing it. A huge number of stakeholders, and therefore to give a theme of CECAN, the kind of complexity of the environment is already there in terms of actually making evaluation impactful within government. But as I say, let's start with the past. So the past. And I'll talk a lot about the cross-government evaluation group, because I think it was a real push forward. This was when the government, across departments and across analytical disciplines, we got together to actually drive evaluation within government. And it had a mission, which was to improve the supply, demand and use of evaluation in government decision making. And I'll return to these three things, but I still think they're vitally important in terms of moving forward. Oh gosh, I'm just going to put it down. Moving forward evaluation. And I think what we did over the time that CGEG was the only driving force of evaluation within government, we did loads on supply, and I think we did really well. So I've given that kind of green amber. Then we had the Magenta book. The Magenta book was refreshed and revised in 2020. I'll say a bit more about that later. There was, I think, a real step forward about the understanding, the knowledge, the expertise amongst government and analytical community, that we really got better at it, rather than saying, hey, we need to do something around this thing called evaluation. We actually were experts in evaluation, and I think got much better at commissioning evaluation as a result. Likewise, I think that the external research community, mainly in research agencies, really upskilled over that time as well, and I think got better. I think there's some really good examples amongst certain research agencies about just how much they invested and really leaned into evaluation over that time. And there was a growing understanding amongst the policy community about what is the role of evaluation in decision making. And actually, one of the really things I'm quite proud of we did when DEC, Department for Energy and Climate Change, is that the training we did amongst our analysts and the evaluation team within DEC, we trained alongside members of the external research community, so that our knowledge and understanding and development was done in parallel. So we were growing together rather than us kind of outmatching each other, because when the external community and the government community don't talk to each other in the same language, that's when problems emerge. However, demand and use, I think, were much, much stickier, and we really did struggle to make progress on this for loads of different reasons. Partly the demand requires a stick. You can encourage people all you want, but equally being told to do this is really effective. And one of the really interesting things that we encountered was we worked closely with our policy colleagues, of course we did, and we were constantly told, yes, of course this is important. Like, nobody was arguing against the role of evaluation and how important it is, but they also had all these other really important things, and they tended to trumpet on the timing issue. Oh, you can do evaluation a bit later because we've got this urgent fire to put out here. And so evaluation kept getting put to the bottom of the queue, and that was a really big challenge. There's a budgetary issue as well, that there wasn't the money there to do the evaluation. There was a locus of responsibility issue. So where does responsibility for this sit? And I think that wasn't fully resolved, and therefore again evaluation kind of floats around. So that demand issue wasn't ever fully realised. And the use, and I think the use is really important, because the worst thing we could all possibly do as a collective that are interested in this area is end up with reports that sit on a shelf, like that you've gone through a kind of handle cranking exercise, you've written something, you've done a great piece of work, I'm sure, and then nothing happens as a result. And that's the kind of the worst possible of all scenarios. And you can have great supply and great demand and still end up with a really unused product at the end. And so there was a real need to get this an active part of policy development and delivery, and aligned with benefits management. Again, I think there was future work to be done there. We did some great things. So CECAN was set up, as Nigel said, founded in 2016, and it was interesting. There was years of conversation with the ESRC and various government departments. At the time, I was in the government social research unit when this was first conceived of, I think. And it was like, we should be doing more on evaluation. And why isn't academia engaged in evaluation? And methodologically, we're not there. There's loads to be done here. Like so this is kind of mid-teens, so kind of 2014, 2015. There was kind of, the tools we have aren't necessarily meeting the demand that we've got. So what do we need to do about that? And we had great conversations with ESRC to try and kind of bring us all together on this. So that need for methodological development, need for academic involvement, to tackle that complexity issue, really aware of that, the Maryland scale and this kind of you need to do a randomized control trial doesn't really work on the messiness of real government policy making. They're not singular interventions. I'm teaching you to suck eggs, but there's a real need to challenge all these things. And there was particular interest amongst Nexus departments. So we got the kind of coalition of the willing together to work with ESRC. And I think it was excellent that we managed to, and actually, if you remember back to 2015, there might have been an election that was kind of unexpected then, another theme maybe of what I'm saying just now. And so things didn't necessarily evolve exactly the way we'd hoped at that time, but ESRC were great and we pushed forward with it anyway, and CECAN was the flourishing result of that. And alongside of that, we've had the Magenta Book, and we've had the Magenta Book since 2011. And it's evolved quite, if anyone's actually tracked kind of what it was, it started off a bit of a textbook. I think that the latest version is a bit more of a handy tool. There's due to be another revision. I'm so glad I'm out of government, so I'm no longer responsible for doing that, in 2025, because I think they're committed to every 5 years they're going to update it. But it is that primary reference document for decision making on all things monitoring and evaluation. And the 2020 update was a real focus on methodology is developing quite hastily, actually. And again, CECAN, I think, a really good example of some of the impetus between that methodological development. So can we kind of make sure it's up to date? But also, can it speak more clearly to our target audience, which are government analysts, government policymakers? Previously, the version before that had tried to have a part 1 and a part 2. This spoke to policy, and it didn't work. So hopefully, it is a lot more targeted, a lot more focused, a lot clearer than it was. And a real step forward that there was that supplementary guidance on handling complexity and policy evaluation. And I think the fact that even government was making a statement on that was a really big step forward. Equally, there's capabilities framework, and certainly when I was in WSP and trying to set up a new evaluation capability, that was my first protocol. It's a really handy, although it's again focused on government, really handy guidance. So I think we made some, in summary, we made some really strong steps, I think, in developing evaluation in government in the past. Oh, but and these are a bit red. NEO really showed, and this is 2021, we're really not hitting, especially these big programs. Evaluation's not hitting the sides of them, and why not? I think there's something really interesting to be done, and why is it only 8% and 64% have none at all? And that's kind of where the money's going. Directors of analysis are considering still in 2021 that demand is an issue, and that learning isn't being embedded back into departments. In response to effectively the NEO report, but also a wider analysis, the Public Accounts Committee, their first line is, it's unacceptable so much government spending is not evaluated. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And it's difficult to find that information, and departments are falling short of requirements on transparency. And there was a response that committed to better transparency and tracking and following up. So present, we have this evaluation task force, and I think it's a really big step forward. So this is a joint Treasury Cabinet Office team. I think there's about 15 to 20 people in it. And under that sit kind of what works networks, trials advice panel, CGG still going, still moving things forward. Chief scientific advisors were never particularly engaged with this, but I think they are now, alongside directors of analysis function, GSR, as I talked about before. And their role is to put robust evaluation evidence at the heart of government decision making, so government can have confidence that the money it spends is delivering better outcomes for the public and value for money. So they've got three main goals: effectiveness, efficiency, and that actually what's happening in government is actually improving people's lives. It's got a theory of change. I wouldn't, anyway, I'm not going to comment on it, but I think there's some kind of clear things, that it's support and advice, and it's challenge, which is great. There's that kind of the stick I was talking about at the beginning, the stick that was missing, which is what happens if you don't evaluate. And now they've got treasury spending teams and conditions of spending decisions contingent on monitoring and evaluation, which is a huge step forward. Transparency, so the things that were picked up in the Public Accounts Committee is there, and an escalation route. So if things aren't happening, there's a route to make things happen. And finally, that kind of quality, really trying to push up the quality of evaluation in government. These are absolutely the champions of evaluation in government, and doing that dual role of support and challenge. So the future. Who knows? And that's number 10's door there. We can't say, and again, nobody can speak politically, even kind of a semi kind of political thing. Nobody has any idea. However, I can't see people rolling back on, again, way back to all these conversations we had in the mid kind of teens about with policymakers about evaluation. Nobody's arguing against this. Nobody's saying it's a bad idea. And I can't imagine anyone saying, oh, we're not going to invest in trying to find out whether government money is being spent well and represents value for money and is achieving the outcomes it's after. So I can't see any kind of rolling back on this. Where we are, the Evaluation Academy has been set up by the Evaluation Task Force, and it is training civil servants on evaluation. And again, that's really helping, especially the policy people, understand what is the role, how can it help me? Again, it's not an audit, you're not being done to, this is something that can help and should help people. I think that's kind of making big steps. An evaluation registry has been promised. It's slightly behind timescale, but it's been promised, and that should be coming along. I think that would make a huge difference, because that helps external people, so communities like yours, but equally the public and anyone else that's interested, hold government to account and saying, you said you were going to do this, when's it coming, and why is it not here yet? The proportion of major projects evaluated, this is on everybody's sightlines. This is on NEO sightlines, the Public Accounts Committee sightlines, the Evaluation Task Force sightlines. They've been told to focus on major programs, major projects. So this is something that I think will have to improve and will naturally improve. I think it's really interesting for us as an evaluation community about what that actually means in terms of the nature of the work. I think there's some really interesting evaluation challenges in that, because what you tend to be with a huge spend is usually huge capital spend. And so you're talking about infrastructure, and you're talking about kind of maybe different ways of evaluating as well. Again, really speaks directly to the complexity issue, because you're talking about probably infrastructure investment and policies, and alongside you're trying for social, environmental and economic benefits, all of these things all at once, kind of, and trying to get them all up and running at once. I think they're really interesting evaluation challenges, and I think there is a continued evolution of methodologically that's going to come from that, and so it'll be really interesting to watch what happens over the next few years. I've done no colouring of the ministerial engagement, but there's potential for this to be a really good story. And actually, interestingly, reflecting back to, again, 23 years in government, as there's a change of administration and a proper kind of one colour to the next change of administration, you actually often get a leaning into evaluation at that point in time, because you're marking somebody else's homework. As administrations go on, you're marking your own homework, and it gets a bit harder. But I can imagine a bit more enthusiasm coming along over the next kind of year, 2 years, when you're looking back and saying, well, all that money that was spent, kind of where did it take us, and what did we learn from that, and how to move on. In terms of kind of where I think big challenges remain, it's around that kind of, it's just what we do. And I think we're still a long way from, it's just what we do, for government saying, we just do, this is just what we do. This is evaluation, it's just a matter of course. It's not something that's debated or thought about, or oh, how do we fit this into our programme board? It's something that's just naturally there. And equally, that routine publication, I think is really interesting and very telling about directors of analysis saying that they're still struggling to get things published and get things out, because when you're publishing kind of a year, 2 years after the event, then the ability for it to fulfill that final column, that use column, is limited. You want, again, I'm teaching to the converted, but you want that timeliness, you need that kind of responsiveness and that ability to for evaluation to have that direct impact. Oh gosh. Here you go. So just kind of pulling right back to where we started about that kind of supply, demand and use, I still think these are the right things to be thinking about, because you need all three elements to be in place. So we do have the Magenta book. We've got quality and analysts in government, and there's initiatives underway to ensure that we are continuing to build and develop and upskill internally. Likewise, I'm really, I think there's hugely impressive things, and again, CECAN being a really important part in terms of that skills development, that getting everybody to try and really push forward to be on the forefront of methodological development and evaluation. It's exciting, it makes it an exciting place to work, but equally it makes us able to be more impactful in our work. And that kind of training, support and expertise available. I would commend anyone that's kind of making these sorts of decisions to think about that kind of dual skilling, that we're training government analysts as well as external researchers alongside each other, because that collaboration, mutual understanding and trust, I suppose, as well, will pay dividends. I think it's really interesting that debate between accountability and learning seems to go away and come back and go away and come back. But I think there is a real benefit. And actually, again, coming into NMIS with an evaluation report being given to me by an external organisation and being told that we're not doing well in external in engaging SMEs, when we are, but just not to the metric that was used in the evaluation. You're like, well, fine, but you can see you're not satisfied with the metric. But so there are things, and I think that kind of collaborative working can help make sure that the evaluation is productive and helpful. So in terms of demand, I think it's really, really positive that the ECT is an acronym I've made up there. The Evaluation Task Force, ETF, is offering both support and challenge, and I think it's a really it's a difficult tightrope for them to walk, but a really beneficial thing, because departments do need that support. They need someone to have their back. They need kind of strength to their elbow, all other kind of platitudes I can say, but equally they need held to account and saying, well, why have you got this huge spending program and nothing's happening here, and what are you doing? And making sure that the spending teams are able to hold policy teams to account if you're not actually getting the evidence that you need about whether this investment is paying off. I mean, it should be a fundamental. We need well-trained civil servants. I think we're getting there, and we need that prioritisation. And just now there is, again, the ETF are prioritising major projects. In terms of use, so there is that kind of spending teams. Spending should be provisional on evidence. Tell me this is working and we'll keep giving you money. It needs to be a key part of programme delivery, and I think there's something still to be done, probably with the policy profession, about kind of how is this a key part of a programme board. It's not something that's happening over here. And the departments I've worked in have always vested responsibility and evaluation in the policy team, not the analytical team, because it's their responsibility, it's their budget, and it will be their decision making. We need to make sure that we're carrying on producing quality evaluation, and I think we're way past the kind of interesting research studies where we're really, really trying to get at what are the key questions and how can you, as robustly as possible, answer these key questions. I think there's probably still more to be done on getting other people to understand these methods that we're using, to make sure that they have as much faith as we do in the methods that are being used. But I think that kind of quality, we just need to kind of keep pushing on in terms of quality of evaluation evidence. And then there's that integration between benefits management, and this is back to the major projects that we're doing. If we're talking about the priorities for evaluation are these big major projects, then they will have a benefits management strategy, undoubtedly. And how do we kind of better integrate these two so they're complementary, and again help that decision making, help the use of evaluation in government. And so that is my past, present, future, I think. Over to you. Yeah.
Well, that's great. We've got about 10 minutes or so for questions, and thank you. That was great. I'll start things off with a question while you're thinking about something else. But I was really pleased to see that you treated use as one of your categories. But it was also one of the things that CECAN kind of taught me was that evaluation really shouldn't be something that's at the end of a policy process. You don't do something and then evaluate it. You evaluate it while you're doing it so that you can learn. And I wondered to what extent you felt that that way of thinking about evaluation has actually penetrated.
That's a very good question. So we, and actually I was seeing Matt here, he was very big on pushing this kind of before, during and after. Evaluations work before, during and after. And we see really good things about this. We've got it in the kind of ROMEV cycle, in the Magenta book, and the Magenta book goes in explicitly and says, this is about before, during and after. Before, very much using previous evaluation evidence, developing that theory of change, helping the theory of change, during that kind of real-time evidence, and then after, kind of like, what did we learn, can get that summative evidence. I think we're quite a long way from that being the reality of how things work in practice on a routine basis. However, I think anyone I've ever worked with and worked through kind of a theory of change way of just approaching policy development has kind of had this light bulb and oh, this is fabulous. And actually I tell everybody, I've got a friend who wanted to exercise her house because she thought it was haunted, and I was like, well, let's think through the theory of change. And so it instant effects in your brain. I'm sure kind of all of you are the same. It's just the way that you think about everything now. And so I think there is but it's a long, hard slog. So I think we need to get there, but I think there's still quite a long way to go.
Let me open up the floor then for questions. We are doing this in a hybrid, high technology way. So I want to make sure that those who are online get an opportunity to ask as well as those who are, as it were, offline. But let's start off with an offline question, and I'll go to the lady there.
Thank you. Hi.
Could you say who you are?
No, so in this room, it would be helpful if questioners in the room stand and say
Yeah.
who they are, and then the Zoomers will get you.
Thank you. Hi, Annabelle Furt, currently Impact and Evaluation at the University of Bath, but formerly Head of Research and Development at DEFRA. So similarly, background in civil service. My question was going to be around the idea of the registration, the register, sorry, and also the idea of it being kind of linked strongly to future funding for evaluation. Do you see that that might have an impact on risk and failure? What if the evaluation shows that it didn't work, or that it didn't provide all of the benefits it was going to do? Did you perceive any sort of negative connotation from that?
I think there's always a challenge of that. However, and again, you know, like say experience me, it was very rarely a kind of black and white evaluation answer. This didn't work. Full stop. You will get kind of this. We tried to do this, but this didn't work. But we understand why now, especially if you've done the evaluation well, or this bit worked and this didn't work, or it worked for this group and not for that group. And so I think I think there's going to be a natural fear because of what you've just said. I think the reality of the learning, and I think it's kind of really pushing that learning aspect of the evaluation can help overcome that. How you then present it in a registry that doesn't give kind of reporters a kind of an opportunity to kind of pick the government is going to be a challenge. But I think we just need to reassure the people that we're working with that there's much more depth to be learned.
Thanks, Siobhan. That was really a great talk. My name is Darren McCoy. I'm a principal economist at Ofgem, leading on evaluation. My question is around the point you made about integrating evaluation and benefits management. I'm just wondering, could you say a bit more about just advice on how to do that? And I think because you've kind of got, you've got the machinery of benefits management that you can use to help embed evaluation, but then you've also potentially got the constraints that then puts on how you do it. And I'm just wondering, how do you, any thoughts on how to navigate that?
I don't think anyone's cracked it yet, to be honest. I think it's back to that kind of before, during and after. I think if you're doing your planning together and you kind of evolve your programs together, then they're more likely to go ahead with this. I think what tends to go wrong, in my experience, is the benefits are over here and evaluations over here. And then when you've both got really mature programs, you start talking to each other, and it's very difficult to integrate it then. But I think a lot of the evidence collection, the data collection is going to be very similar. And there are probably efficiencies to be made there, but I think it's just collaborative working. Some departments, I think, have started to do some really good work. I think DEFRA is one of them, actually, about how to kind of pull this together. But I think there's work to be done by the community to learn what works and what doesn't from that.
I'm Siobhan. Gary Cass currently wearing his Royal Holloway hat. Used to be in DEFRA and Natural England. So my question's about just similar to the previous one, but part one, which is about potential downside of linking spending to evaluation, which is things don't work. If we just carry on funding things that we can show work, we're not going to fund anything because nothing works. And also the things that we want to work need such enormous transformation that they need massive innovation. So how can you stimulate innovation by tying spending to evaluation?
I think it's a really, really good point. I think fundamentally what we were originally after, we've got, which is spending teams saying you need to evaluate and you need to have budgeted for this, and I'm going to keep an eye on your evaluation activities. In terms of the decisions that then come off the back of it, there needs to be an understanding about what transformative programs are and look like, and also that kind of quite clear-sighted view about kind of what should be expected when. And that's back to kind of all of that evidence and previous evaluation evidence that feeds into that, that doesn't lead you to expect kind of transformation in 6 months of a programme launching. And I think, again, there's a big education, and that's why the education has to be policy people, spending teams, as well as the evaluators and the analysts. But I think, so I think getting spending teams interested, the spending teams then need to be educated about kind of what a real world looks like in terms of kind of getting transformation happening. But there is a risk, and I think we just need to watch that very carefully.
Martha Bickett, CECAN, University of Surrey. You talked about the evaluation task force, and that's relatively new. I've been off on maternity leave, so before I went away, through discussions with them, my personal view was that at the outset, they were focusing quite a lot still on experimental methods. And so I guess my diplomatic question to you is, how could the ETF best support, or perhaps less diplomatically, how could it better support the complexity of evaluation?
So I've got to get out of free card because I've been out of government now for about the same amount of time, and so I'm not sure kind of what they're doing there. I think they do have a real investment in upskilling and education, and I think it's for the likes of CECAN and the CECAN events programme and others working in the field to work with them, and that's that kind of joint upskilling again is kind of like, what are the real challenges here and how do we work together to solve them? It's government's always looking for a simple answer to a complex question, and that's kind of part of the whole thing, and that's what I think that's where they started off, because you need to be able to say something and reassure the powers that be that are investing in this programme that we've got a way to assess quality. I think it's part of a journey, and I think they're on that journey, and I think we just need to have faith that we can work with them and kind of ensure that journey kind of continues. And it links really closely actually back to Gary's question around kind of like you don't expect transformation in 6 months, and so I think we just need to kind of make sure that as this field within government matures, that all that knowledge and understanding is built around it.
Hi, Vanessa Perez from NHS England. Unlike most people in the room, my background is not in evaluation, it's in system thinking. In my head, the two things go really well together and they need each other. In health and care, I think we are still trying to separate out the two of them. I would like to hear from your experience whether you see them working together very well, system thinking and evaluation, because of the complexity part of it, I believe. Whether there have been successful experiences using the two of them.
So again, I think it's one of the evolving areas. I think, and again, this is exactly where we've been concentrating. And I think having that supplementary guidance from the Gender book that talks explicitly about this was a really important step forward, because it also But actually my experience of government analysts are that they're incredibly diligent, want to learn, want to kind of really dive into an issue. So I think there is kind of a real mobility of thinking evolving within the government analytical community. Getting it done in practice is still challenging. And I think there's also that kind of a systems map alongside a theory of change, and how does one evolve into the other. And I think there's not very many people that actually have got that worked out in a way that can then be kind of applied routinely. But I think, again, there's a really receptive audience there that are really keen to develop, and I think we are developing and we're evolving there. I mean, I can't get over just how much evaluation's changed in the last 15 years. It's unrecognisable to what it was in kind of 2010, and I think that's great. But I think there's still a good way to go.
I've now got an online question. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Joel. I'll ask Joel to
Hi, I'm a PhD with the University of Surrey Centre for Environment and Sustainability. And my question was related to the theory of change, particularly the impact column. I just was wondering, in terms of this sort of methodological space and developing a common methodology, if there was any current work or you're seeing any kind of demand for a common set of impact indicators specific to particular policy buckets or verticals.
I think there's always an appetite for that. The reality, and actually it links really closely back to that relationship between appraisal and evaluation. And I think appraisal very much have kind of standard metrics, and there is a desire to just kind of apply them for the evaluation side of things. It tends not to be that easy, and you need to be really careful you're not missing out the unintended consequences and everything else that's going on in that busy space. So I think there's a desire. I think there's a real benefit. And again, in DFT, we were doing some thinking around, if you're doing all these evaluations of road schemes, can we not just get some kind of core things that we're going to be looking at that are common? You can still do your bespoke evaluation and understand what's happening in that particular scheme, in that particular context. But equally, there's some core things so we can then put them all together and find out what's happening across the space. So I think it's a bit of this and a bit of that, to be honest.
Great. Time for one more short question. So who's it going to be?
Andrew Giles from ICF. I think our sense is there's progress, as you've described, happening at sort of project and program level. But to what extent do you see the structures that you've described in terms of accountability and systems supporting systems that enable us to establish whether policies are working as a portfolio, whether the 20 things that exist in the same system are at least the sum of their parts?
Again, I'm 18 months, 2 years out of government. It's very particular to particular departments. I think there's some, if you've got a really strong team that are really pushing things, then things can move really well. I don't think it's uniform, and I think that's one of the things that the task force is really trying to challenge and work with.
Well, thank you very much indeed.